Welcome back to Tea with Alan and Pete, to the next episode where Alan and I are in slightly different situations, not in the office. We're both working from home today, but as you can see, Alan has his teacup in the background. Today we're here, we're going to talk about the purchase process from starting out, where do you start? So it's really my question, Alan, to you is, I'm looking at starting out, in this audiophile world, and you've perhaps been reading reviews, reading magazines, hopefully Hi-Fi Plus, and getting ideas of what you want, equipment you'd like to purchase, and how do you go about doing that? What are your recommendations? I know that you started out working in a dealership, didn't you? I think many moons ago. And is that still the way forward? Is that what you would recommend, and is that the best process?
Let's start at the very beginning. 30 years ago, I started working in a well-known dealers in London, hi-fi dealers in London. I'd been working before that, but in other fields, and had an interest in hi-fi. So obviously that was kind of in part to pay for my addiction in stereo kit. So I ended up owing them so much money. I worked for them, and then I worked for them full time, and then I started working for a magazine. So, but yeah, it does give you a good grounding in what works and really what doesn't. And in some respects, there are a few things to take from that. The first is reviews are useful, but reviews are useful in two respects. First of all, they act as a shortlist. They also act as a little bit of a filter, but more importantly, they act as an introduction. There are products that you might never have thought of that are ideal for you, that appear in a magazine, that you would suddenly you think, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, I'll give that a try. So that, I think, makes quite a big difference. However, the selection process really kicks in when you start to work with a good dealer. And sometimes I'll be honest, the downside with dealing purely with magazines from our perspective is that we review everything. We review all manner of different products. Not every dealer, not every distributor, not every retailer will stock everything. And there's a tendency, certainly at the beginning, to pick what is the best of the best in the terms of award winners or something like that, and just buying a system that works like that. And quite often that isn't the right way of doing it. Often the best way is to spend some time at a dealer's with a few of your own recordings. That gets a lot easier when it's streaming, but it's the same thing if you're playing records or CDs or what have you. Speak to them in advance, discuss your discuss what you want, but be prepared for a little bit of wiggle room there. Some of the things that you have to include in that is not only the type of music that you listen to, but the space that you'll be listening in. If you have a room that's 20 foot by 16 foot, it'll be a very different system that you'll put together than someone who's got a room that's 10 by 11 or 60 foot by 40 foot. The system will be different because of that. Generally, that also means that if you are in a lot of the metropolitan dealers will be making systems that suit metropolitan homes in their area. So, it's not a question of if you live in Manchester, you go to a Manchester dealer. If you live in London, you go to a London dealer. Although those proximity issues are good, but it's also that local dealer will have a bit more of a read of what happens locally, so they'll know the dynamics of the room spaces that they'll be used to playing in, and that also makes a big difference. If you see somebody who sets up a system that's designed for very, very small rooms in say New York or Tokyo, and you want a system that's in your house 60, 70 miles outside of New York, which is much larger, then possibly a dealer who's really geared toward that metropolitan system won't have everything to deal with, and vice versa. The guys who are dealing with big estate size systems might sometimes struggle to do something they won't. It's not their area of expertise. So at first point, one of the things is the initial dialogue with a dealer is to kind of sound them out and sound you out. You find out what you give them a sense of what you're going to be listening to, how you're going to listen to it, and the space in which you're going to listen to it. And be honest with that, because you can sit there and say, I only listen to what you think you should be listening to. And if you sit there and say, I only listen to opera, and you go home and the first 25 tracks you play are all techno, then that's going to change the system. And you may end up with a system that doesn't necessarily suit your needs. Mm-hmm. So it's important to have that dialogue, and it's important to have discs that you know well. They don't have to be recordings that are audiophile grade, although it's good to have something that's well recorded. But there have to be pieces of music that you know well enough that you can play. The dealer should have some recordings that showcase what the system does and where. The next part is the audition. Now, the audition at its best would happen at home, but in reality, often the first one is in a room that is similar to yours at home. So again, that's an issue of size and dynamics of the room. But you'll put together a system or you and the dealer will put together a system that works really well, or you hopefully works really well. Now, at this point, it comes in where we say with the good and bad with the reviewing process, is that if you put together a system where the CD player isn't one that you know, or the streamer isn't one that you know of, or wasn't the one that was the best of the breed in that particular one, and yet it still works in that context, go with that. Because in some respects, what you end up doing is finding a system that you're finding a fine-tuned system that works for you. And that system may not necessarily be the one you expected. So there's a little degree of wiggle there. And that's not just an upsell. That's not just an idea of saying, oh, you walk in and say, I've got £5,000 to spend, and you walk out and say, I bought the best £20,000 system known to man. It's much more about getting a system that works for you. And sometimes that can actually work out cheaper. I remember back in the dark ages when I was working in retail, the Best Buy, the awards winning system of that particular year had a CD player, an amplifier, and a loudspeaker, obviously. But the CD player, amplifier, and loudspeaker didn't actually gel together. And paradoxically, at the time we stocked all three of them, and paradoxically, a cheaper CD player inserted in the system of great amp and great speaker from the same brand sounded better. So a Marantz CD, I think it was a Marantz CD63 SE, we felt that the Marantz CD52, which was a cheaper CD player, sounded a lot better. And every time we demonstrated it, everyone agreed. But a lot of people just went with the Best Buy option. So it's a choice of listening, and I think that it's a listening process.
I think it's interesting it's an interesting point there, is that actually, you can look at awards that products have received, and it's not just a matter of going, okay, well, that was the award winner, those speakers have won the award, that CD player, that amplifier, those cables, put it together, and it may not actually work. And I think that's, perhaps if you're coming into this and don't know where to start, it's a key point to say, just because it has, something's been given an award doesn't make the whole system, it wouldn't make it gel if you put it all together. It's a really key point, that, and it's interesting that you say that, because that was something that you identified through working in the dealership and knowing that you had different components to play around with. but it's not necessarily something that you know, Joe Bloggs would recognize without the opportunity to play around so much.
No, and it's not to say that the award products that receive awards are bad, because they never are. They're always good products. It's just that in the context of building a good system, and a good system for you, sometimes they don't gel, and that's the point. It's not that. I mean, in some respects, it's we're victims of our own success here, because there aren't that many bad products in audio. You can, I mean, we have a lot of very good devices, not just at the high end, but across the board. We have some very, very good products, exceptionally good, and also a lot better than they used to be. I mean, when I started 30 years ago, some of them would 30 plus years ago, some of them would be someone would throw you across the room if you turn them on the wrong way. I no longer need to turn products on with a stick, and part of that is through better legislation and better controls and standards, which we all adopted. But part of it is also we've just all got a bit better. The products have got better, and they are now at a point where they're very good. So you're fine-tuning a system, and that's an important part to do with the dealer. And often that process plus the installation process make a big difference in terms of how a system sounds. Now, every box, every loudspeaker especially, comes with advice on how to set up a loudspeaker, and that advice is well worth taking. However, the difference between, say, you doing it and a professional who's done it a lot is they know the nuances that you'll spend ages doing. It's worth exploring. It's a fascinating aspect of that fine-tuning of moving a loudspeaker a few centimeters or even a fraction of an inch to the side, and suddenly the whole system sounds a lot better. But the guys who do this a lot really know how to do that. They know that nuancing of a system, and that can make the difference between something that sounds, yeah, it's all right, to wow, that's amazing. And that happens absolutely across the board.
And I think, again, that's a really, really key point, is that so often today we're very much used to the kind of plug and play market. And, you know, how many people do actually read the manuals? You know, if it's something that you don't need to put together, you know, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who have bought a set of loudspeakers, taken out the box, plugged them in the best looking place in their room, and not realize that, you know, with a little tweak here and there, the quality of the sound could improve, you know, for wherever their listening position is. And that's where you miss out on very much if you don't have that influence from a dealer or the help for the installation. But I think the difficulty we have, though, as well, is with, you know, society has become very much a online purchase environment. And not just that, it's a kind of a purchase now and expect to receive it the next day. And I feel for the dealers, because they're sort of, to a point, they're missing out, because, you know, those of us that know, actually, you need to spend time, you need to sit down, and generally, actually, you know, the whole system purchase process, in my mind, is a longer process than most things. You probably spend more time listening in a listening room at a dealer's to a system than you do looking around a house or test driving a car. Before you might drive a car for an hour, you might spend a couple of hours in a, you know, at a dealership. And it's very difficult because, you know, we're very much of that mindset of, right, well, I like the look of that, I want to buy it. And, you know, how do dealers cope with that? Because obviously that, you know, they can open an online shop, but you can't demonstrate online as such, you know. And I know some dealers are doing like a 30-day home trial, or, you know, that kind of thing. But that's quite risky, because it then means you haven't got an A1 brand new product that gets sent back that they can sell as unused.
Yeah, it is very difficult. And I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right in saying that the the amount of time we spend listening to it, it's closer to something like buying, it's closer to buying that bespoke suit that you have for your wedding, or if you're in the city, the bespoke suit you wear every day. I know people who wear, I mean, the joy of a good bespoke suit, said the most sartorially challenged guy you could find, is they have wonderful abilities to accommodate all sorts of balloon shapes or weirdly, oddly shaped human beings to make us look as good as we can. And anyone who has got married in a hand-tailored suit will attest. They have a little code. I mean, funnily enough, when we were talking about read the manual, dealers have a code with products that come in. Some are called RTM, which means return to manufacturer. Some are called RTFM, which means read the manual. I'll let you fill in the blanks and think what the F means, but I think we all know. But tailors have terms like DLS for drop left shoulder or something, because none of us have even, so that they accommodate so that when you walk in a room, people don't notice they don't notice the limitations of your body because they're covered in a suit of armor, which is wonderful. But the analogy holds with a good system, because a really good system is quite hand-tailored to you. Yes, it may be that there are similar products that, if you walk in, a dealer, as I said, a dealer doesn't have an infinite number of systems. Even a online retailer will not have an infinite number of products for you to look at. So the system is always going to be geared and governed by that. It's going to be constrained by the number of components that you have, that the retailer provides. But within that, there's a myriad range of products a myriad range of systems that will suit you to a lesser or greater extent. And that fine-tuning process, yes, you can do it online, but often online it can end up taking a great deal of time. And this comes up to another thing that I think is important to talk about. I said earlier about a relationship with a dealer. And one of the things that we used to find, and I think still holds to this day, is people sometimes expect, they'll run from dealer to dealer because they hear good things in one guy and good things in another and good things in a third. And what they really want is a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of something. And if you're not careful, you end up in this kind of awful case of analysis paralysis, where you run around from dealer to dealer trying to find that ultimate £5,000 system. And each time you do, you find a little bit from one and a little bit from another, and you never actually put a system together. At best, and it's not really best, you'll end up making a decision that's either based on the cheapest one or the ones that you think suited you the best, and you buy from 5 or 6 dealers. At worst, you just run around and never buy anything, because you sit there and you can't enjoy a system fully, because you're trying to find the best one, and you'll never settle for what you feel is second best, but is actually really well designed for you. But instead you end up with something that really doesn't, you never settle. And that's, we used to see that so much, that a guy would have gone to every single dealer in London when there were many, many more. My dealership was in London, but you would see every single guy, they would go to every single guy and ask the same questions and never buy. And it wasn't that you could desist, the dismissal was, oh, they're just a tire kicker. But in fact, often it was somebody who genuinely wanted to buy something, but they were just trapped in a loop of going to see different people to see different things. And at one point, I think you should probably limit yourself to maybe 2 or 3 go-sees in that respect. Because if you...
Right, because I think, what you'll find is, whilst you're doing that process of never quite being happy, there are more products being released as well. So it's a vicious cycle, essentially, and you never really get anywhere. But yeah, I mean, I think it's all really interesting. I think we'll carry that on in the second part. Let's take a quick break for now, and we'll come back to that shortly. Welcome back to the second part today. Alan and I were chatting in the break, and we've been talking about dealers and the journey of purchasing, and how actually it's really quite important to visit a dealer for your purchase, and not just to get the right advice to start out, but to get the installation help and then the ongoing help as maybe products change, or maybe if there's a problem with your product, just that backup, and that's really a really important message that that we're kind of getting across today. And then Alan had a gem of wisdom during the break, which he's going to share with us.
Yeah, it's not much, but this is a little free tip that I think everyone can benefit from. We spend a vast amount of time and energy talking about products that eliminate radio frequency interference and electromagnetic interference. And one of the best ways of doing that without, okay, conditioners and everything else are great for that, but one of the things that you can do is try and limit the number of these things that you have in the house. And I can guarantee right now at the moment, there will be 10 or 15 little USB power supplies sitting there doing nothing somewhere in the house. They'll be in the bedroom, they'll be in the kitchen, they'll be sitting there somewhere, not plugged into anything, not necessarily plugged into a cable, not charging anything. They'll just be sitting there because they're there. And what you should do is don't throw them out, but just chuck them out of the system for a while. Chuck them out of the mains loop. If you've got any connected to this power strip that's on your hi-fi system, just get rid of them. Take them out and leave them out of there. People do that all the time. I've seen it in so many shops, in so many. I've done it. We've all done it. That because you've got this lovely 8-way, 10-way long power strip, and sitting at the end of it is a little power supply for a phone charger. And all that they do, they're switch mode power supplies, but they're not very well filtered. I'm not saying specifically the Apple one, that was an Apple one, but it could be any of them. They all have the same issue. As I said, they're a switch mode power supply, but they're necessarily cheap, and as such, they're not very well filtered. They're not very. They're putting a lot of RF noise into the mains, even when you are not necessarily using them to charge anything. They're just sitting there and making some juice. If nothing else, we're all very conscious of our power consumption, and if they're just making a little bit of power consumption on standby, just remove them. That would be fine. I'm not altogether sure if they do, so don't quote me on that. But certainly, if you've got 5 or 10 sitting around it on the end of power supplies, just be a bit more careful about them. Limit them a little bit. It's very difficult because if you hoover around a house, you'll find a dozen of them sitting there doing nothing. And if you could take 8 or 10 of those away, your system will sound a bit better.
Okay, excellent. That's good to know. And guess what I'll be doing when we finish this conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I observe that. It's more in the breach than the observance there. I think you could find a dozen sitting there doing absolutely nothing.
Sure.
Now. Anyway, but yeah, try it. See what you think.
So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Yeah, look out for the July issue of Hi-Fi Plus, which is available at the beginning of July in all good news agents and online. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the next issue.
Bye-bye.
3, 2, 1.
Hi there.
Let's try that again.
You'll try that again.
I'll say hello, and
you do intro, yeah.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Tea with Alan and Pete. This is the second
third.
Well, is it because the first one was 2 parts?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Start again, second. Or just ongoing.
Yeah. Next part.
Okay.
3, 2. So pathetic. That was such a child.